Alrighty, welcome to another video of making things to make it through. This week we have kind of a longer video, but it is me making one of the most useful things I have found, and I really enjoy making these. It's another leather product, and this is a Field Notes leather cover. So Field Notes, they're these little notebooks. I really like using them for ideas, journal writing, grocery lists, goal setting. They're just kind of a compact little notebook that I like carrying around, and they are not super durable, so I like making these covers for them so we can take them outside. You know, they can take a little bit more of a beating, and these covers just turn out really cool. So I just grabbed a template online. I printed it on my printer and just cut it out, and then I used the leather I had and cut out some of those shapes that we're seeing here. And with this, I was able to glue the edges. I had to burnish the inside edges, the ones that I'm not going to be able to get to later, to sand, and you'll kind of explain a little bit more as this comes together. But as I'm gluing these edges, I clamp them down to ensure that they don't shift. Sometimes you'll put glue on them and you'll get a little bit of shift. But up until this point, I just cut out that template and then I cut out those pieces on some leather. So nothing too crazy. Once I have these pieces, this is going to be the inner insert of it. I have to measure the middle line of this, and you'll see me making a mark here. This is so that I can then sew a line right down the middle, and it creates two card holders. So here I'm doing some saddle stitching. I'm not gonna slow down the saddle stitching, because if not, this is a part that would make this video 3 hours long. So I'm going to speed through this so that you can see kind of the end product. If you want to learn how to saddle stitch, maybe I can create a video for that. But in the meantime, you can just YouTube saddle stitching leather and you can see how to do that. It's not too complicated. So here we have the kind of the outside layer, and you can kind of see these layers are coming together as I glue. And once again, there's a lot of pieces in this video that I'm going to speed up so you don't have to kind of see me slowly applying each piece. But I'm cutting, gluing, and just kind of building it layer by layer, so we can kind of get a rough outline of what this is supposed to look like. So I always put a heavy book on this. I think this is a GRE prep book. I always put it on there, let it sit for a little bit, and then I move on to the other side, which this is the cover that's actually going to hold the notebook in there. So same exact process. I just gotta glue it, gotta line it up, and then once again I'm going to put a heavy book on it so that we can get it to kind of solidify in place and kind of glue down without sliding around or moving too much. So here's my GRE book doing its work again, and here we see we have kind of a rough pre-draft of what we're looking at. So you can see that line I saddle stitch in there to create those two little card holes, and then I want to round those edges. So I have these little tools that you can hook up to a press, or you can use a hammer, and I'm just going to clip off the edges of those. I like using that tool so it's even on every side. You can see the piece there that I cut off. But then I use this edging tool just to make sure I gotta make sure it's just right off the edge, and then I'll kind of indent a line into the leather just like this. And when I do that, that creates a guide for when I'm actually punching the holes for the saddle stitching. Speed this up so you don't have to watch the entire thing. Okay, and now I have this tool. I hook it up to an arbor press. Not everyone has an arbor press, but before I got an arbor press, I would just use a hammer. And you can see on this little cutting board that I have punched plenty of holes into many different projects. So this arbor press just makes it a little quicker than hitting it with a hammer, but you can do it with a hammer at home. It makes it just as easy. And when I get to these corners, you see I have to switch out the bit just so I can round that corner. It's kind of a tedious process, and I'm sure there's a better way of doing it, but this is the way that's been working for me. So I'm just going to keep punching holes into it, and once I get those holes punched, then I can hook it up to saddle stitch again. And once again, if you want to learn how to saddle stitch, I'm sure there's many videos on YouTube explaining how to do that. That's actually how I learned how to do it. But maybe I'll create a video here in the future so I can help people that may want to learn some of these different leather making skills. Okay, so now you can see I punched holes all the way through, and I'm going to go back to saddle stitching. The reason I do this saddle stitching is because I don't have $3,000 for a leather sewing machine. But I actually like this, it's therapeutic. I'll put some music on. And ignore all my wire mess. I recently moved my desk and I have not had time to figure out how the wires are going to work on there. So the saddle stitching, once you get the hang of it, it's really not too bad. It takes a little bit of trial and error and some practice, but once you get it, you can, and obviously you can see none of those edges are perfect, but that's the glory of making these, is you kind of learn along the way and nothing's perfect, and I kind of like how there's some imperfections. It adds a little bit of character to each piece that I make. So I have this Dremel tool that has a little sanding disc on it, and I just like to use this to kind of smooth those edges out and make it even all the way across. I don't like to grind it way down with this, but I just like to touch it lightly so that we can get more of a clean edge on there, and then it also clips off some of that glue that may be sitting there from when we glued it together. Okay, so here is a part I'm going to skip through a lot because other than the saddle stitching, the sanding is the part that takes the most time. So what I like to do, I'll kind of explain what I'm doing just so you can kind of get an idea of the best way to get these edges that I've seen. So I like to work through 4 different grits of sandpaper. I start with 240, then I go to 320, then I go to 600, and then I go to 800. So what I do to get a glossy finish on these is I will sand first with the 240. I'll sand in one direction. That's the most important part that I've seen. So sand in the same direction. And then once you're done sanding with that, once you feel like the edge is really smooth, I just put a little dab of water and kind of work it in there. And that kind of helps create this little layer. You'll kind of see me doing it and jumping between these layers. Once I'm done with that, then I'll move up to 320, do the exact same thing. Sand in the same direction and then dab some water on that edge. And then so on and so forth. Once I'm done with that one, then I move up a grit of sandpaper and I dab it with water as I go through until I get to the 800 grit. And once I'm done sanding, it usually creates this little edge that I use the edge beveler here and just take off that little, this is a satisfying part. It just cuts off that little sliver of leather. It just kind of cleans up that edge. This is one of my favorite parts. I just think it's really satisfying to have it glide across there and just cut that little itty bitty bit of leather off the cover. So I've taken that little edge off of it. Once again, I'll hit it with that Tokonol, which is what I've used previously. You saw it at the beginning of the video, but here I just put a little dab on that edge once it's been completely sanded. And Tokonol works best when you apply it and then let it sit and get about half dry. So I'll kind of apply that all the way around this leather cover that I have here, and I'll let it sit for a little bit. And then I have a burnishing wood piece. And that burnishing wood piece, it works really well when you get it in the edge of the wood piece and you rub it back and forth and create a little bit of friction, a little bit of heat. And then once the tokonal has been sitting there for a little bit, it kind of creates a perfect seal for that. And once again, I'm going to speed through this because sometimes it takes a little bit. And once you do that, you do get some pretty smooth edges I've seen. This is part of the process that took the longest for me to learn. But you can see here we have a clean field notes journal ready for some gift cards or ready for some credit cards, ready for some pieces of paper, notes. And take this on your next adventure. This is one of my favorite things to make, and these notebooks are great for this. And you can note down anything you want, the fish you catch, where you fished. And yeah, this is making things to make it through. Thank you so much, and like and subscribe for more.